Alright, this is behind the scenes on the video that I made called How Can You Win? And it was a recorded game basically. And this is Unity 3D. This is a game engine. So it is completely 3D, completely interactive, which it shouldn't have been, but I did it anyway. I will get into that. That's a rabbit hole that I tend to do too much. And I create everything all by myself. So this is really kind of my workflow and how I create things. And I have an artist background, so I was trained traditionally, I guess, so drawing and painting. So I always kind of break problems down as if I'm an artist. So the first thing I always want to nail is like composition, lighting, or color, or value, something super artistic. And usually I'll draw something, but this time I kind of had a clear idea of what I wanted to do. So the first thing I wanted to do is see if the lighting will be the way I wanted it to be. And that took me a while actually because I was using Unity's HD render pipeline, which is completely new to me. And in order for me to understand how it works, I had to like backwards engineer it. And the funny thing is like that's how I kind of draw or paint stuff that I don't understand too, that like I need to see the finished product and then I need to slowly break it down for my brain to digest it. And I do that with everything. So I used their example project, the Morgana project. And look, I still even have the post-processing volume they had. And I just used their example. I went through and adjusted and I changed things and tried to figure out what everything actually did. And once I understood that, I was like, cool, I'm good to go. There's some other things too that is new to the HD render pipeline to me, like I said before, because this was new to me. The directional lights, the lighting is totally different, and they have way different values and ranges, and it's super precise. So that was super helpful, just to play around with it, just to see. So once I got like a good lighting scene down, I was confident that I could make what I wanted to make. And so usually my workflow goes is I'll draw something or design a doc, whatever it is. It starts with the paper first. And then I'll jump into modeling right away just to get something in engine. And that's my biggest thing. I always want to see what things look like. I'm my own hype man because I'm developing it by myself. So I need to hype myself up. And if I see something, even if it's in my head, it just needs to match just a little bit. And then I can build on top of it. So the first thing I did was I went to ZBrush. And ZBrush is a sculpting application. And I sculpted all the pieces out. Why did I sculpt the pieces out when I could have modeled it? Because the horse is going to have to be sculpted. I'm not modeling a horse, so that's not going to happen. And I'm really used to using ZBrush, so it was just a pleasure to use, especially the new version because they have a lot of new tools, like for instance this Sculptris Pro mode where you can basically sculpt any resolution you want depending on your brush. It's polygons are not a limit, you're just trying to create, and I'm always trying to do that, like not have a tool limit me and just have my artistic skill be the limit, not the tool itself. So I basically sculpted it all in here. I used a combination of Sculptris, Dynamesh, and Live Booleans. And I also did the topology in here as well. Like I said before, I wanted to see what things look like in engine right away. So I wasn't too concerned with poly count at all. I need to see what it looks like in engine. So I use ZRemesher. Sometimes ZRemesher is a little bit janky. So I will use slice curves to kind of make polygon flow for topology. And then I'll use ZRemesher's keep groups, and it works out pretty well usually. So it'll follow the group loop, I guess you can say. And I also did the UVs in here as well because once again, I don't care. I want to see what it looks like in engine. And I know sometimes like this is not an industry thing. I don't know if it is an industry thing, I should say actually. This is an Omari thing. And sometimes like I will fix things later on, or I might not even want to do more than what I did. So I always try to do a little bit less, I guess you can say, in the beginning, just to get something inside the engine. I can't stress that enough. And that's just how I work. And the faster I can see it in engine, the more problem solving I can do. Like I said, because I'm an artist, so things are very visual for me. And so I did the UVs in here using UV Master. And I use actually the same method where I will basically group things a little bit, polygroup them, and then let UV Master do the rest. And you can check the UVs. I wasn't concerned about seams or anything like that. I didn't care. Oh, I looped it. Oh my gosh. Undo. Here we go. Because I sliced it, the UVs are all messed up. But yeah, I didn't really care, and I just wanted to get something out as fast as possible. And so once I did that, I put it back in engine. And I got all the pieces made. I can show you the other ones. They're not, it's nothing too fancy, to tell you the truth. A lot of radial symmetry, nothing too crazy. Like I said, I need to see it in engine. That's just me. I have to see what it looks like in engine. And then once I did that, I checked the lighting again. So I'm like, okay, cool. Lighting's there. I made a little box to show the chessboard. It's like, the lighting's good. All right. Now let me start adding texture to it. So I went and I used Substance Painter. And man, Substance Painter is really cool. I enjoy using it. It's basically Photoshop for 3D stuff. And the cool thing about Substance is, man, back in the day, baking maps was not a fun thing. I remember in 2004 when I first started sculpting, just baking a damn normal map from a high resolution mesh felt like you were pulling teeth. It was such an annoying process. And maybe because the computers were slow, the tech wasn't out there. I don't know what it was, because it was just not, it never came out the way I wanted to. Substance Painter is, oh my gosh, it's the best just because of this. Just because of this one option, just because you can bake maps. And so because I have a high resolution mesh in ZBrush and the low resolution mesh, I basically can get whatever I want from it. So pop them both into here, bake the maps out. I got normal, ambient occlusion, all the other maps. I don't even need these maps. And I just start painting from there. So I didn't want to make things too complicated. So I have a couple pieces. They're all textured the same basically. I have a gold trim on it. And I had, this is the original clay piece in the video actually. And I downloaded some clay brushes for ZBrush. I forgot where it was at. But they had some normal maps in there, and I was like, yeah, that's exactly what I want. I want to have this earthy, hand sculpted feel to the black pieces. So I feel like it's beautiful. It's kind of rough around the edges, but really beautiful. And I use that, and I will tweak everything to the smallest degree. Even if it's, I don't care what it is. I'll mess with it just to see if it's a little bit better. If I can add more contrast or add a little bit more highlights, things like that. And that still comes from an artist side of it too, of just painting and especially with oil painting, you're always adding another layer, So it's kind of the same mentality. And a lot of stuff actually is just base materials that I used that I adjusted inside of Substance. So even the marble, it's like something base, and I just adjusted it, and it turned out the way I thought it would. And once again, I threw it into engine right away, and I'm like, yeah, things are moving forward, cool. So I need to model the chessboard, and I use Modo for that. And Modo is just your standard 3D application. It does everything: renders, animates, rigs, all that stuff. And I've been using Modo for a while because I used to use Lightwave 3D back in the day, and that's the first 3D program that I learned at a community college. And I felt like people were using Maya, and I just didn't like the interface. I always felt like Maya is not artist friendly, and that's just my opinion. So I here's another thing too: I am not loyal to any software at all. I can care less. All I care about is it doing what I want it to do, because I'm the creator here. If it doesn't do what I want, I don't use it. And I'm really strict on that too, that I will learn another tool if it doesn't do what I want it to do. So Modo always has done what I wanted it to do, so I use it all the time. And this is a standard modeling, beveling and things like that. So all these locators that you see here, this is the rabbit hole. So my dumbass, man. So I did not need to make this. I basically made a movement system for all the pieces, and this is something that I do sometimes where my ego jumps in and it starts creating things that I don't need to create. I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna make a chess game with AI and it's gonna destroy each other, and I'm like, I don't need to do all that. But I had to stop myself, but not until the end, I have to tell you the truth. So I did make it anyway. So I used these locators just to have a position for Unity so I can create these volumes that I can name and basically give it its own system of checking where pieces are at. Yeah, I didn't need to do that, but I did it anyway. So if you also watch the video too, which is somewhere, if this is Instagram, it's somewhere on my, I think somewhere on my page, and then if it's Facebook, it's somewhere on my page, and if it's YouTube, the same thing, you'll see it. It's called How Can You Win? A lot of the pieces, all the pieces get destroyed basically, and I had to basically, so in Unity, using physics all the time isn't the best option. It will definitely, it's too intensive, I feel like, especially if you have a whole bunch of pieces. So what I did was, I basically broke the pieces up within in Modo under this geometry, mesh shader, and I use a cluster. At first I used Splinter, but I didn't like the way they fell. So I used cluster, and it will basically break up these pieces. So you can see they're solid. And so in Unity, I gave it a collider, gave it a rigid body, and I had it just fall. And I wrote a script that's an object recorder that just records all the pieces falling and puts it into an animation. And so basically, all that destruction you saw, it was not real-time physics. It was just a recording of an animation. So I did it a couple times just to see if it looked right, and it turned out the way I wanted it to. So that's Modo. So we can go back to the engine. Now, there was a lot of things I learned in terms of, just using the HD pipeline. So I wanted to adjust light on runtime, and just finding out how to grab these components it took me a day or so. I was like, where is this at? I found it on a forum, and basically it allowed me to just be able to adjust the parameters on runtime. And so you can see that by changing the exposure on a gradient sky, it's kind of like night and day. It's super awesome. And so I did a lot of adjustments of this throughout the video. So you'll see it like go dark and then light. So the other thing I did in Unity as well is I did not use the timeline. I made my own state machine basically. And the reason why I did that was because I don't know, it's 15 minutes long. It's pretty long. So I didn't want to have like this long graph of, things that are popping off. It's just not, my brain was not going to like that. Also too, in terms of me making this, all the events at first that I wrote were written by keys. So I would press a key and then an event would happen. And so by doing that, I got the timing in my head right. So I knew how I wanted things to transition in and out. So if we go to the animator, you can see that this is basically my state machine. And it's all based off of also the audio too. So each state will play an audio or not play an audio. And depending on how I wrote it or how I had certain parameters clicked inside, it would do something different. So like the very first one, I have a use timer. It waits 4 seconds to use then it'll go to the next node. So it was super useful just to like organize everything, and so it can happen without me pressing keys. But the pressing key part was important just to get the timing right in my mind. And to go back to the post-processing stack, getting the component, this is it right here, this line of code. That profile that try get out, and you get the setting out. It was, honestly, this thing changed everything. So by doing that, I can adjust all the values inside of those components. So other things that I do too, and this is like a little bit of code stuff. I taught myself how to write code, so whenever I make stuff that I'm just constantly adjusted and I'm not shipping it, I don't care. I make it public and I just use whatever I want to, so I can constantly adjust things and move things around. So I tend to use Unity as much as possible whenever I create something. And by me saying that, it's like I'm not going to rewrite a trigger when Unity has a trigger, or I'm not going to rewrite a list if Unity has that. So like I let the engine do as much work as possible. The other thing that I do a lot is I tween everything. I don't get why people don't do this, but man, everything should transition. So I always tween stuff. Lean Tween, you can download in the asset store, is the best thing ever. I tween the shit out of everything. So, because like things should not pop in your face. It's abrasive, you know. Like, let the user ease into information, even if it's like a fraction of a second. It shows a little bit more that you care about the experience. At least my opinion. So I lean tween everything, and yeah, my code is not too crazy. I'm all about readable code. There won't be too much fancy stuff in here because I don't feel like the need to do it. So there's no polymorphism or anything like that. It's just a whole bunch of functions running each other, and yeah, like I said before, I did make a movement system, which I shouldn't have done, but I did it anyway. And it basically is, where are the controllers at? Here they are. Like, I have controllers. So they're basically, if I click on a piece, once I click on the piece, it asks, hey, what type of piece are you? And it's like, oh, I'm a rook. Cool. Grab the rook controller, put it at this position. And then I would do logic within that, checking what's inside of these triggers. Yes, I shouldn't have did it, but I did it anyway, because in the video things automatically move because I didn't need to make it interactive. It was just a video. So that was a rabbit hole that I made. So I made a raycast selecting system that would select the pieces, figure out what it is, turn on a particle, move it around. Yeah, there's some stuff I did not need to do, but I did it anyway. The clouds. So, well, the clouds it's another artistic thing too, where I sculpted out the cloud shape first, and I was looking on the internet for just cloud tutorials, and everything I saw in Unity, like it didn't satisfy me at all, actually, and I don't know why that is. Like maybe this didn't look right. I saw some stuff for Unreal that looked dope, but I'm not using Unreal for this. So basically what I did was I sculpted out the shape. I know what shape I wanted, and this is the artistic side again. And I'm like, okay, cool, this is the shape I want, so this is what I'm going to use. So the next step was to basically get these nice noise gradients over each, polygon, and to tessellate it. And so I use Amplify Shader to create this. I won't lie, my shader skills are not the best, to tell you the truth. I understand what should be going on, but not enough, And so that's something I'll be working on in the future. But I end up making this using a couple examples that I saw and me tweaking it on the artistic side, because I wanted to have layers of, bubbles or like, noise. Another thing is a lot of tutorials I saw were not using UVs, and I use UVs instead. And so if you look behind it, you'll have a split because the vertex offset is moving it around. And that was not. It worked out. I think it worked out. And yeah, so once again, I understand the shapes that I want, and I'm just trying to translate what I know things look like, color, value, shape, into 3D. So I'm always going back to that base of drawing and painting. And the other thing was the VFX cloud. This thing, so the first cloud that I made, oh my goodness, I showed the video to a friend, and the friend was like, yo, that brain thing that's destroying the pieces with lightning is cool. And I was like, I did not want, it's not a brain, but I didn't tell him that. But that was his actual, like, that was a raw response that he thought it was a brain. So it's like, cool, that's not what I want it to be. So I went in and learned the VFX graph. I believe I can, let me show it to you. And so they have a tool within the VFX graph that allows you to bake point cache. And so I sculpted another cloud, and then I baked the point cache, and then I used that to basically have particles appear at those vertices. And once again, then that's another artistic thing. Like I knew the shape. I know what shape I want. I just don't know how to get the surface to be more like a cloud. And so it made sense to me that, like, why don't I just use like particles? And this, I guess you could say this was a happy accident, which doesn't happen a lot to me in terms of game development. I feel like with painting and drawing, happy accidents happen all the time, but not in game development for me. So I'm using the position of my point cache, and then I'm basically using a quad and putting a regular like gradient sphere on top of it. And because I'm using a quad, it's affected by light, and because of that, you get this awesome feel to it. Like, it feels like it's really being hit with light. So yeah, it turned out the way I wanted it to. And the tree trunk I did not make. I have the capabilities of making a tree trunk. I just knew that it would take me a couple days to do it, and I still had so much work to do, and I decided not to do it. So I went to Quixel Mega Scans and I bought a tree trunk. And I'm all about that sometimes. Sometimes you need to purchase something to get the project moving. Just do it. Like, throw your ego outside. It doesn't really matter. And because if you know you can do it, why would it matter, right? Like, okay. Now, this is the pride and joy of this entire project to me. The entire project. And this is another thing about hyping myself up. The ghost pieces. Oh my gosh, they're so cool. Alright, so these are the ghost pieces. Now, this was an important part in the video as well. I really wanted people to understand about the whole looter thing, and that, like, these people are really humans. They're not these crazy, people, and that, like, basically that they were destroyed at one point. Like, they lost all their pieces. You don't just do stuff just to do stuff. Like, you have to get to that point. So I was really trying to emphasize that these people are so visible, but they're so invisible. And everybody's always like, why would you do that? Well, it's like, man, how do you think someone gets to that point? So it's like, okay, well, cool. Let's make a ghost, because people are afraid of ghosts. People, they're scary, but people know they exist. Well, theoretically, they know they exist. So I like that contrast. So I wanted to make the ghost piece have like this shadow movement to it. And let's see if we can get it. Ghost piece. So if you can see it, right? Oh man, just looking at this gets me so hyped every single time. And so basically, like, it is using a basic particle system, but it is emitting a lower resolution version of the pawn and putting it at its position. So if I move it, it's basically just, emitting it at that position. I was trying to make the Johnny Cage shadow kick, and I wanted to make sure that it was on the piece. I don't know, it feels like, it feels like it's there, but it's not there. It's constantly moving, a little bit weird, And I was super satisfied with this. Like, so I was so happy with this when I got it done. And yeah, so this is just a standard. Maybe I can show you the shader graph on this bad boy. I can show you the other shaders too as well. So yeah, cloud, what dissolve? No. Did I use a shader graph for this? I believe so. Yeah. Oh, I used Amplify shader. So this is the this is what I used to make the shader. And it's not too complicated, right? Gradient sample. Turned out really well. I can show you the cloud too as well. That thing, man, my cloud shader, I'm not too, like I said, I need to learn some more shader stuff, so I'm working on it, you know. But I know how I want things to look. So this is just me adding and multiplying certain noise generators and having it move along the UV axes. And then I had other parameters inside of it to give it this different scale and different offset, so things are not all the same, so I can get this little bit of variation in it. And it worked out the way I thought it would. Like I said, like there's still, it's not soft enough for me personally, and that's why I was like, what should I do? So I used a depth of field just to get that soft edge. And so that's that. Not too complicated, I feel like. Nothing too crazy. A lot of stuff. So the thing is too, like I said, because this is my project, a lot of stuff I'll have in here and I'm like, is this gonna work? And I'll just leave it in there because I'm not necessarily sure. So I keep stuff in there. And same thing with code too. Like I'll just comment it out and leave it in there because it's just me looking at it. So it's like, it's kind of like having my computer desk. It's kind of messy sometimes. Sometimes it's kind of clean. Same thing. And that is basically it. So yeah, the process is always this back and forth. And I think this is the reason why I love development so much, is that you can see how things are going to turn out, and then problems always occur. And so you're constantly always fixing your problems and trying to move forward to the end goal, which is the finished product. And there's such a great enjoyment in doing that. So yeah, that is the end of it, and I hope you learned something. And if you didn't, it's cool. I don't know, I'm thinking about putting the project online. We'll see. Probably not, because it's kind of heavy, and I'm a little bit embarrassed with all my habits, because oh my gosh, my friends always make fun of my code, and I feel like it's amazing. I name things the way I want to. They don't like that crap either. But yeah, so hopefully you learned a lot, and till next time.